Hello and welcome back to the Frugal Granny channel. My name's Ali and I'm Frugal Granny. I'm an almost 65-year-old semi-retiree trying to make the best of what I've got until I get my state pension, hopefully in July 2027. Today it's Saturday, it's the 1st of November, so we're into a new month now. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about something called Swedish death cleaning. If you're new here, you're really welcome. I hope you'll hang around. It'll be lovely to see you again. And if you're a returning viewer, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for all the comments and engagement this week. I really do appreciate it. And if you are a regular viewer and you're not yet subscribed, please think about doing so. It doesn't cost anything. We have no memberships on this channel, and subscribing would help me an awful lot. Right, so Swedish death cleaning. Let's start with a little story, and this happened a while back now. Those of you who've been with me a while know that I was brought up abroad in Africa. Well, most of it in Africa, a little bit of it in the Western Pacific. And because my parents were moving about constantly, they effectively had 3 households worth of possessions. They had the possessions that they left in our home in Somerset in England, the possessions in that house that were for use by whoever was renting the house while we were abroad, and the personal possessions were put in the smallest bedroom, which had been my bedroom, and that door was securely locked. And then we had the possessions that we had taken or acquired wherever it was that my father was contracted to at that time. And then as time went by, especially after we left the Western Pacific, we ended up with a third set of household possessions, because you could not fly things out of the Western Pacific posting. Everything had to go by boat, and it took months. So that stuff went by boat from the Western Pacific to the UK, by which time we were back in Africa with another set of possessions. Now, I think I've told the story before about what happened in I think it was 1978 when I flew out to what was then called Swaziland for Christmas with my family, and I had my younger brother with me. And a couple of days after we arrived, my mother had a massive stroke, and I had to accompany her back to the UK, leaving my father and my brother in Swaziland. And he had to work a 3-month notice period while my mother was in St Mary's, Paddington. And then we came back to the family home in Somerset. I was on the verge of taking my A-level examinations. But that summer, when I was at home, I was in a position where I had to deal with the possessions that were in our house that were in use by the tenants. I had to deal with the boxes that were in the bedroom that was technically mine, which were my parents' personal possessions. I had to deal with the packing crates that had come back from the Western Pacific. And then I had to deal with all the packing crates that came back from Swaziland. So there was effectively 3 households of stuff. My mind has really sort of blocked that out a little bit, but I do remember there being 3 irons, a lot of cotton sheets that had gone mouldy that had to be thrown away, all sorts of things. And the issue obviously was complicated by the fact that my mother, who was now home, had limited mobility. She had no communication, no vocal communication skills. And we also had to buy a few things to try and make life easier and safer for her. That was when we first got an automatic kettle, because she couldn't, I'm sorry to say it, she could not be trusted to turn a kettle on for a cup of tea and remember to turn it off. So that's when we got an automatic kettle. It's when we got a lighter cylinder vacuum cleaner rather than an old 1950s type upright Hoover. I spent that summer, when I wasn't waiting in a local restaurant, unpacking, sorting out the stuff, getting rid of bits that were damaged beyond repair, trying to get rid of duplicates of things that we didn't need. And this was compounded by the fact that my father could not get employment in the southwest where we lived. He had been a teacher in the local school before he'd taken his first overseas posting, but a lot had changed in the 10 to 15 years since we'd left the country, and there were no jobs available for him. And because he'd been out of the country, he couldn't get benefits. And so in the end, he took a job up in the Midlands, and he went up there in a caravan. Well, I was left to sort out the house, pack up what was needed, and get ready to move everything to a much smaller and more modern property in the Midlands. Well, I'm not going to tell you the rest of what happened with that story, because it was quite traumatic, actually. But I do remember, even as an 18-year-old, saying to myself, I am never going to put my kids through this when I get old. I am never going to have all these things and put my children in a position where they've got to make decisions under pressure when family circumstances around them are anything less than ideal. And after we did move up to the Midlands, the second bedroom in that house, which was quite a large room, was literally stacked to the ceiling with boxes for months and months. And so was the dining room, I remember. It really was not a very conducive environment in which to live. Anyway, so all through my adult life, I've tried to keep possessions down. I've shed things left, right and centre. And there was one situation I lost. I didn't lose it. It was taken by accident by a second-hand bookseller when I was out of the house. And that's the only thing I really, really regret. There was a set of leather-bound books of folk tales of the world that belonged to my maternal grandfather. And I'd gone out shopping, my ex-husband was left in the house, and a second-hand bookseller came by arrangement to pick up some books, and he took that pile of books with him. Of course he would. He knew what they were. And I'd not left specific enough instructions, obviously, and I never got my books back. But that's one of those things. I think about it now, it's one less thing for my kids to worry about when it's my turn. But I would have liked to have had those books from my grandfather, but never mind. I have other things from my family, and those books, you know, they're neither here nor there now. So yes, I've shed things a lot over the years, and sometimes I've actually forgotten that I've shed things, and I've been running around the house looking for things, and I've not been able to remember if I kept them, put them somewhere safe, or got rid of them. But usually in the end, it hasn't really mattered. And as I've said before, I've downsized twice now. So once from the really big house to the house I was in when my marriage fell apart, and then another 50% of stuff when I moved to this house. And I thought I was doing quite well with shedding stuff. But in 2018, I was laid up after major surgery, and I was on my sofa for a good number of weeks staring at my bookcase. And when I was actually able to get up and lift and move and do things, I went through that bookcase. I was very, very brutal, actually. I got rid of a lot of books. I'd already got rid of 2 or 3 crates of books before I'd moved. I'd sent a lot of my academic stuff to a museum in Norway, and a lot of the more sort of pulp fiction had already gone to the Oxfam bookshop. So effectively, my books were contained in the size of one bookcase, like the one you can see behind me there. I think I had about 4 or 5 shelves worth. And I went through it again and got rid of a lot more stuff. I got rid of some ornaments that were on there. And that, going through that bookcase, started me going through every single cupboard and drawer in the house and getting rid of stuff. And that was spawned by having 8 to 12 weeks on the sofa, considering my own mortality, and remembering the promise that I'd made to my future self when I was 18 and had been clearing out my parents' things. And I think at that time I had actually come across the concept of Swedish death cleaning. I don't know how. There was a book published about it by Margareta Magnusson, and she published that. Actually, yeah, funnily enough, it was in January 2018, and my operation was at the end of February 2018. I can remember that because it was -6. The taxi didn't come, it was snowing, and I actually walked to the hospital rather than miss my operation. So yes, that book and me sitting on the sofa rather coincided with each other. And those of you who follow me regularly will know I have an interest in Scandinavian culture. So I was quite interested with this whole concept. I've not read the book. I don't like to buy books on decluttering and minimalism because it's rather contrary to the whole concept. You're buying something in order to get rid of something. It doesn't really add up in my mind. But just the thought of paring your possessions down so that you're not leaving a massive task for your kids if you die is a concept in itself. For me, it doesn't really need unpacking with clever cliches and things. So I did go through my stuff. I started listening also to that American duo, the Minimalists, and there was another guy, is he Joshua Becker? I can't remember. I listened to some of his stuff on YouTube as well while I was sat on the sofa and decided, yeah, I really needed to clear out. So in terms of getting rid of things that you don't want your kids to find if you pop your clogs, what was it that I got rid of? Well, to be honest with you, I didn't do what Margareta Magnusson suggests and start with your clothes. I went straight to my memory baskets. I have 2 memory baskets. They're a little bit like those wicker baskets you can see off to my left. And in them I had all of the letters my ex-husband and I had written to each other while we were engaged but living in different parts of the country. And I took them all into the garden along with a myriad of greetings cards, the cards that we were given for our wedding, all sorts of things like that. And I stood over a metal bucket and I burnt the lot, and I made sure they were burnt properly as well, because I thought I honestly do not want my kids reading those letters once I've gone. I know it may sound a little bit like torture, but I have kept the note that he left on the doorstep when he disappeared. But apart from that, I'm really quite ruthless now about what I keep and what I don't. You know, if people send me birthday cards, I don't keep them. People send me Christmas cards, I might keep them for a bit because I like the picture on the front, but generally I don't keep them. I do not want my kids to have to worry about this sort of stuff or go through all this sort of stuff card by card when my time is up. Now, the other thing that I burnt was a large box of spiral notebooks. Now, after my ex-husband left, one of the ways I treated myself in terms of therapy was to start journaling. And you know that phrase, dance like nobody's looking. Well, I wrote in my journal like nobody was going to read it. And it was very cathartic. It was incredibly helpful. I wrote in notebooks that are sort of like this size. And I ended up with it's an 18-litre plastic box, an 18-litre really useful plastic box stacked up with those notebooks. So there must have been a good 15 notebooks in there. And I just thought to myself again, I'm nobody famous, so nobody really is going to need to start researching my thought processes by going through these notebooks. So again, I took those out into the garden, tore all the pages out and burnt them. And that in itself was quite cathartic. I'd already put all that stuff down on paper, and now it was going up in smoke. And this was a couple of years into me moving into this house, and so it really was quite significant of making a new start. So those things went as well. I went through my filing cabinet, which is under the desk behind me, and anything that was more than 7 years old, I've shredded and burnt. In the UK, you really do need to keep 7 years worth of documentation for legal reasons. When it got to the point where it was 7 years from the time I closed my small business, I had a massive pile of paperwork for that, and again I took all that into the garden and I burnt it. I still have my tax records from way back in 2012 when I found myself on my own, just because, I don't know, that gives me a little sense of security. But I know I don't need those. I technically could burn everything up until, what year are we in now? 2025. So anything from 2018 onwards I could keep. Anything before that I could probably burn. And I've got my tax stuff going back to 2012, so I could burn those 6 years worth of records, but I'm still not brave enough to do that yet. So once I'd sort of dealt with all the what you might call embarrassing stuff that I really didn't want them to find, then I started going through my kitchen cabinets one by one and pared those down, and I got rid of quite a lot of stuff. As I've intimated before, I've not always taken things to a charity shop. I've put kitchen items and bits on the front wall and people have taken them. We also have a suburb, I call it a yard sale day in the summer, where people can walk around the streets and buy things from people who've set up a little stall outside their house. I've done that a couple of times. In that respect, once I started emptying cupboards of more practical things rather than personal things, I've actually thought to myself, well, you know, I am downsizing now. At that point, it was just my youngest son and myself, and then perhaps the rest of my kids and their partners at Christmas. So when it comes to plates and things, I don't really need more than 8 of anything. And so I started to shed. I shed cookie cutters that I didn't need anymore, moulds for, one of those Norwegian almond paste Christmas celebration cakes that I'm never going to use anymore. My daughter took the hand-cranked pasta machine, which funnily enough she bought me a few years before, and I said, well, I'm never going to use it again, you take it. And so I really did start to downsize. I know I've still got a lot of stuff, and I've now that my youngest son has moved out, I think this has prompted another round of, well, I suppose minimalising, decluttering and Swedish death cleaning, and me thinking, well, if something happened to me, would they have a problem disposing of this thing that I'm holding in my hands? When I stand in my kitchen and I think, no, there's nothing in my kitchen really that I don't use, or that one of them might want to use in their kitchen, and if they didn't, they could either put it on the front wall or take it to a car boot sale with no sort of qualm of conscience whatsoever. None of it's valuable, all of it's useful. It's all clean, it's all mended. It really would just be a matter of them making a quick decision. Do you want it? Do you want it? Do you want it? Or do you want it? No, car boot sale, charity shop. And that's really the way I want things to be. Obviously, there are a few things that I've got that are not going to be easy. I have 3 heirloom pieces in my house. One of them's a spinning chair that was made for my 1902. It's got carved on it. Let me just get this right. She must be my great-grandmother, because she was my grandmother's mother, and it was carved for her wedding. and it's got a matching chest that goes with it, which she would have kept the wool and the fabric in for spinning. And my youngest son has already said that he wants to have those. So they've been kept. I have been that close on 2 or 3 occasions to actually selling those. But I do think it would be a bit of a travesty because they were made specially for my great-grandmother, who would be his great-great-grandmother, and it would be a shame to lose those. There's also a Victorian painting of some hunting dogs that he wants. That was bought by my father at an estate sale. I think it's got some value. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but he likes it, and it hangs above the sewing chest. So those 3 bits all go together. I mean, the other thing that I would like to think my kids would keep is my grandmother's tea service, which I think I've shown you before. It's Old Leeds Spray by Royal Doulton, which is quite collectible now. And those things that are precious, I've actually left a post-it note on all of them, or a sticker, telling them the provenance of those pieces, where they came from, who they belong to, and various other details about them. And then they can make an informed decision about what they want to do with them. If I'm not here, I'm not going to know, and I'm honestly not going to care. I mean, I have already got rid of another tea set that belonged to my grandmother, and I had no qualms about that. I had 2 tea sets belonging to her. I had one that was in cream and green with gold round it, just not real gold, just gold bits. And then I had the Old Leeds Spray, and I thought, I cannot keep both. I've got to choose. So I decided to keep the Old Leeds Spray because my father's family, and she's my paternal grandmother, came from Leeds. My father's family is from Leeds ad infinitum, and I thought that is more pertinent to my family history than this other one. So those are the main things I think I would like them to keep. And there are a couple of bits of jewellery that came from my mother or my paternal grandmother. And again, I've left a note with them saying who they belonged to. And there's not much more I can do about it than that, to be honest. But as I've said before, there's nothing of value in this house. All I would really hope to achieve for my kids is to minimalise any hassle. But I am entering another sort of round of decluttering, and it's really interesting because you can see the main culprits over my left shoulder. There is my broken laptop, which I need to finish clearing things off the drive and then decommissioning that, ready for recycling. There is the PC that belonged to my ex-husband. I mean, that is now 13 years old and has only been switched on a handful of times, if that. I really need to spend a couple of days just doing one more sweep through that hard drive and then decommissioning that and recycling it. It would be lovely to have my desk clear so I can put my new laptop on it and turn that into a workable work area now that I'm at home every day. And then here was a pile of clothes and a cushion and a hat that I've never worn that are waiting to go to the hospice shop. And a pile there, that's mending and some linen that needs to go back up to the attic bedroom. But yeah, I mean, I could go through the stuff on that bookcase. At the top, there's a flute and some music that I've not played since before I moved here. I can't really play the flute here because the neighbours are too close, and I'm getting arthritis in my fingers now. So what I really need to do is ask my kids if any of them want the flute, and if so, they can take it and keep it. Otherwise, I really ought to probably sell that. There's quite a lot of second-hand paperbacks up there, and when I've read them, there really isn't any point me keeping them because I tend to read things once and then that's it. So once they're read, they can go. I like to keep the CDs because they do remind me of younger days. But again, when the time comes, it's not going to be too hard just to throw those in a bin bag and take them to the recycling. Behind those piles there are the remains of my cookery books. I did have a number of shelves of cookery books and I've now reduced that to 2. I am thinking now that I'm on my own that I really ought to reduce those books again by 50%. So in a sense, this area of the house is the next one to tackle. The sitting room is as tackled as it can be. There's a drawer in the back room that's got quite a lot of what I would call outdoorsy stuff in it that I need to make a decision about. But I can hold on to that a bit longer until my kids are in a position to say whether or not they need those things themselves. And those things are in good condition. I don't want to become like my former mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law, who didn't seem to understand that things could go to a junk shop or a car boot sale. They always had to come to me, and then I had the burden of getting rid of them. And I don't want to be that mother-in-law. I really, really don't. So I would much rather my kids felt free to be honest with me about what they want. I don't want to turn up with bags of stuff and then cause them a problem. In that respect, I'd rather just give them a phone call and say, do you need X, Y, and Z? Yes, no, and then deal with it accordingly. And so, yeah, I think, as we get towards the latter part of our lives, it is important to go through things and clear it up so you don't leave a big hassle for your kids. And I was reminded of this again just after the pandemic, actually, when my neighbour died. She was in her mid-90s and her 50-something-year-old daughter was living with her as her carer. And after she died, they brought a skip. And I think a lot of the stuff was her late husband's and came out of the wash house shed. But really, that wash house shed should have been sorted out years before, rather than leaving it for her kids, her grown-up kids, to arrange a clearance day and put it all in a skip when they haven't really got the mental capacity or even the time to deal with it properly. I sat there on my sofa that day looking out of the window at the skip, and I've got a picture of it somewhere. Maybe I can find it for you. It's in one of my Instagram archives somewhere, but that really focused the mind as well, as did when the similar thing happened, I think, a couple of years ago, to another old lady who lived down the street who talked to me occasionally as I walked by, and I saw all her stuff in a skip as well, and it's really very upsetting because things that are important to you as a living human being actually have no inherent value at all to the people who are clearing your home, whether that be your family or whether that be a total stranger. So I think my message really in this video is not to sort of set you off on a massive decluttering journey, but just to start where I did and think, is there anything in my house that I really don't want my kids to find when I've died? Because that's where I started. And, burning all that paperwork, or even if I'd sat and shredded it, it can take a long time, and it actually brings up a lot of emotions in yourself as well, which you need to deal with. And I think it's useful to do it and not leave that for your kids, when obviously if you are a person of note or an academic of note, you may want to file and archive your paperwork in a way that you do save it for posterity. But as I said, I'm nobody important. Nobody really wants to know my thoughts. And so I was quite happy to burn love letters and journals and old financial records, etc., etc. So, you know, please be sure before you do it that that's what you want to do, because once the thing is destroyed, you can't undestroy it. But at the same time, we do hold on to a lot of stuff that we don't need. So that's all I really wanted to say today. I know I've rambled on an awful lot, you know, but my youngest son moving out has kicked up a lot of dust, obviously, and it's started me off on another round of clearing out that's probably going to continue right up till Christmas. I'm hoping everything will be sorted. Everything I want to sort this time will be sorted by Christmas, but I'm probably fooling myself. Declutter, but declutter mindfully so that you don't regret what you've decluttered. There really isn't any mad rush, and if we do pop our clogs before we've done it, then there's nothing much else we can do about it. It will go in a skip whether we like it or not, but we're not going to be around to care, are we? Anyway, on that rather morbid note, I'll see you on Monday for Magazine Monday, when I've been doing a little bit more cooking. I've had my middle son, my second son. I've got 3 sons. So my middle son has been with me this week on his way back from a business trip, and so he'll be having dinner tonight and lunch tomorrow at least, and so you're going to benefit from some of the cooking that I've done. But anyway, until then, it's time for your pup date. You've probably heard them snoring all the way through this video as usual. Anyway, so thank you for watching, and I will see you all on Monday. Have a lovely weekend. Bye bye for now. Oh, kitty. Oh, such an old kitty. I love you very much. Bella Rooney.